Our communities, churches, and families include people who live with vulnerabilities, such as poverty, marginalization, and issues related to our physical and mental health. Our faith invites us to live and respond with love and action. This video series offers insight and perspective on some of the most crucial issues facing Canadians and the Church in Canada. I'm David Gretzky, President and CEO of the Evangelical Fellowship of Canada. You're about to hear from Julia Beazley, Director of the EFC Centre for Faith and Public Life. Julia leads a team that works a mere 10-minute walk from Parliament Hill in downtown Ottawa. Much of the Centre's work is interacting with government and the courts on issues of concern and encouraging positive action by citizens. Julia will walk us through why caring for Canadians living with vulnerabilities is a gospel thing for us to do. We encourage you to continue this conversation with your community by using the questions Julia will share at the end and that you can find at TheEFC.ca.
One of the most familiar parables Jesus told was about a man who had been beaten, robbed, and abandoned. He was left wounded on the open road. He was vulnerable. In Jesus' story, religious leaders didn't stop to help this man, but instead passed by on the other side of the road. It was a Samaritan, a person from a disliked social group who stopped to bind his wounds, carry him to safety, and provide for his care. Jesus summed up the teachings of Scripture in this way: love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, strength, and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. Throughout Scripture, we see how compassionate God is. God hears the cries of the Israelites in Egypt and leads them out of slavery. Jesus leaves his glory with the Father at a personal cost and comes to be with us in humility, taking on our frail human flesh and becoming a servant. As we think about how we are to move through the world, caring for our neighbors who are vulnerable is central to our calling. It's what God has always called his people to do, and a way the church has always tried to engage. It's a way that we do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with our God. We were created to help one another. Each person's life is precious. Each one is made by God and loved by him. And God is calling us as Christians in Canada to care for people experiencing vulnerability in our neighborhoods, communities, towns, and cities. Vulnerability is part of being human, and each of us is likely to experience vulnerability at some point or at several points during our lives. And we can be vulnerable for many reasons. A person may be vulnerable because they lack the relationships, community, resources, or supports they need to be safe, to be healthy, and to flourish. They may lack protection or experience marginalization, racism, abuse, or exploitation. They may feel isolated or like a burden as they age. People with disabilities may not receive the support they need to live. Or some of our neighbors might struggle with physical or mental health challenges, experience poverty, or be unable to find affordable housing. Think about your local contexts, your neighbors and communities. What are the needs and vulnerabilities right next door? There is so much good work already being done. I think of groups like Caris Disability Services that help people with disabilities accomplish their goals and thrive in communities where their God-given gifts are valued and respected. I think of organizations like Compassion Canada, Samaritan's Purse, and so many others that fight poverty and support people experiencing social and economic hardship. And I think of the ways Defend Dignity provides support for those who've been exploited. I can think of a church in my own neighborhood in Ottawa that's opened a food bank to help meet the needs in the community, like so many others across the country. Churches and followers of Jesus are reaching out, building friendships, and offering help. And there is so much more we can do together. Here are 2 ways we can care for vulnerable people among us. First, we can ask for laws and policies that support and protect vulnerable Canadians. The laws we have in place directly impact our neighbors. So asking for good laws is one of the ways that we love people in our communities and in our country. At the EFC Centre for Faith and Public Life, we engage on federal laws and policies and produce resources to keep you informed and equipped to engage as well. For instance, we advocate for safeguards and changes to Canada's euthanasia laws because they put the lives of vulnerable Canadians at risk. Our laws currently protect minors from being eligible for medical assistance in dying. That's a protection for teens and children. But some are asking that the law be expanded so they would be eligible. We need to advocate for the protection of our neighbors, for them to receive the supports and care that they need to live well, and for the repeal of euthanasia expansions that put their lives at risk. We also advocate for supports and care for people dealing with mental illness, people with disabilities, or who are experiencing poverty. We advocate to protect children from seeing violent, sexually explicit images online by asking for laws that require meaningful age verification on pornography platforms. And we advocate for laws that effectively address and prevent sexual exploitation. Second, as followers of Jesus, we can reach out in practical ways to support people in vulnerable situations. We could make a meal for someone facing illness or loss, offer a ride to an appointment or to church, help someone practice their language skills, or volunteer at a shelter, food bank, or hospice. We could coordinate our efforts within our church family or with others in our community. We can start by taking stock of our resources. What abilities do we have to share? What networks can we tap into? What passions drive us? We can also pay attention to what's already happening in our local communities. How can we participate in and support good efforts that are already underway? Often by just starting somewhere, we can begin to see gaps or discover our strengths. The needs can be overwhelming, and we can't do everything. But we can pray. God, what would you have me do? Who is a person experiencing vulnerability that I can reach out to? Help me to hear your calling and direction, to share your love this day and this week. Care for our neighbors is deeply rooted in Scripture and in our understanding of what it means to be followers of Jesus. It is one of the most beautiful parts of our faith, to give and to receive in this way. When Jesus told the story of the Good Samaritan, it was in response to an expert in the law who wanted to justify himself. Jesus said the sum of the law was to love God and love our neighbors. And the man asked, "But who is my neighbor?" And as Jesus finished telling the parable, he asked him, "Who proved to be a neighbor to the man attacked by robbers?" The expert in the law replied, "The one who had mercy on him." And Jesus said, "Go and do likewise." This is a question we must also ask ourselves. Will we prove to be a neighbor to those who are vulnerable? With God's help, may we too go and do likewise. Thanks for watching. I want to take a moment now to encourage you to really consider how you can live out our common calling to care for those who are experiencing vulnerability in our communities and our country. This truly is one of those big issues that is also very local. Our own friends might need someone to come alongside for a time and say, "I'm with you. You're not alone." As you continue this journey, here are 3 discussion questions that might be helpful to consider in a group or even for your personal contemplation. Can you think of someone you know who lives with vulnerabilities for whatever reason? What questions could you ask them so you could listen and learn about what partnership and support you could offer during this season in their life? What fears and concerns do you have about stepping more fully into the calling to love our neighbors in these practical and spiritual ways? How might you address these fears and concerns? What have you learned from your interactions, serving, partnering with, and living alongside people experiencing vulnerabilities? How will that shape your engagement with people experiencing vulnerabilities going forward? Thanks for engaging. We're with you on this journey.